Drew's muted.
I
Drew is just muted. Okay, there you go.
Hello, what the hell? Are we okay? I can
We're
start
back.
over.
We're back.
Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Reaction Show. My name is Andrew Velez. I'm here with my co-host, Mr. Joel Dells. This is episode number 27 of the Fantasy Reaction Show. We're here after Sunday Night Football. Eagles, Cowboys, a game that we all were looking forward to. We thought it'd be high scoring, especially after that first Eagles and Cowboys game that we saw. We know that the Eagles have been struggling a little bit, and by say struggling a little bit, kind of just got their ass beat by the Niners. Was their worst game by far of the season. And the Cowboys been playing some good ball. But before we get into any breakdown, and before I ask you how you're doing, I'm going to get everybody in the chat to wish my brother, Mr. Joel Dells, a happy belated. My brother is 26 years young. You're getting old on me. I say young. I'm being kind. You're getting old on me, man. But how you doing today, and how was your birthday?
Doing good, man. We had a good time. We all went out. Unfortunately, no Riv was there. No Joel was there. So really, opened my eyes to who really my brothers, because not being at my birthday dinner was pretty insane.
Pretty
But
nuts.
we went, we got some meat. Went back to the apartment, watched the Lakers win the inaugural in-season tournament, King James MVP. It was a good birthday, and then hey, we finished it up with Sunday. Both of us, if you guys been following along, in our main league, me and Drew are both in the semifinals of our playoffs. We do 2-week playoffs. We're on opposite sides of the bracket, so everything goes
The
to
fix is
plan. We'll
in.
hopefully meet up in the finals. First weekend, we both got the lead. Nothing's set in stone. We still got a whole week of football to go. Whatever happens can also happen in reverse. We're not going to get ahead of ourselves. But one weekend, we're looking good. I just see everyone in the comments going crazy. Basically, everyone's saying, Riv's going to duck tomorrow. Riv's going to be sick. He's not going to be at the podcast tomorrow. Oh, man. Philly's going to get some hate. I think the way they've played these last two games, going up against two of the tougher opponents in the NFC, they deserve some hate. And this goes on both sides of the ball, offensively and defensively. We'll get into that game a little bit, but how are you doing, Drew?
I'm doing okay. Can't complain too much. As you guys know, Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott, the cornerstones of that team that Joel's talking about. And Dak, he had himself a modest ball game. I think that if the Eagles weren't terrible, Dak would have went a little bit crazy. I also have CeeDee Lamb. This is the team of dreams. But Jalen Hurts, we're going to talk about him in the dud section. And I won't be too rude because it's the first time that he's been in that section. But goodness me, oh my, what happened with the Philadelphia Eagles today? It hurt. It hurt. But before we get into that, again, like I said, I'm doing okay. Can't complain too much. Fantasy team's going to be put in a solid position. But the only player on my team to not put up double digits this week was Jalen Hurts. So again, I'm doing okay. I can't be too upset. He's been one of the best players in fantasy all year long. But we're in the semifinals, and you're going up against a division rival in the Dallas Cowboys. To not put up double-digit fantasy points, it just hurts a little bit. Hurts a little bit extra. But in the grand scheme of things, I can't complain too much. But listen, my heart wants to talk about it. I feel like we just got to get right into it. Let's talk about this Philly and Dallas game. Dallas just looked ready for the moment. And the Philadelphia Eagles, we talk about it every single week. And it was highlighted last week more so than anything. But really, these 2 weeks emphasize that if the Eagles aren't scoring points, this is not a team worthy of being in the playoffs because of how bad this defense is. And ironically enough, the defense was able to score a touchdown coming out of half. And I think you tweeted that they saw your tweet, that you were being rude about their defense, but you're not being rude. You're being completely honest. Dak was able to do essentially whatever he wanted. You look last week versus the Niners, they were essentially able to do whatever they wanted. But where we can talk about the defense, we could talk about the offense and also them not being able to hold on to the ball. I don't know if last week kind of set off something in their mindset where the offense is now playing with a little bit of pressure. Now they're kind of pressing a little bit where, hey, if we don't score points, we're kind of put in a messed up situation. And I say that with the idea of we've seen them and their defense not be able to step up, but their offense was able to rally, come back, and win them ball games. Now, for the first time against the Niners, we saw that the Eagles were put in a position that they're playing from behind, and they weren't able to execute offensively. We saw Jalen Hurts struggle for really the first time in a long time all season. And I say struggle because he wasn't able to get that fourth quarter rally like we've seen out of Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, this game, It seemed from start to finish, the offense just wasn't able to click. It starts with Jalen Hurts fumbling the ball. It starts with A.J. Brown getting into a little bit of a feud with Stephon Gilmore. That Stephon Gilmore, he won today. I don't care about the 9 for 94, Joel. I know that the stat line in fantasy football, you're probably pleased because he was able to do a job. Stephon Gilmore forcing that fumble, getting underneath AJ's skin, and turning the ball over was huge. And then Smitty drops a touchdown, doesn't hold on to the ball. He also fumbles. And I'm also forgetting about A.J. Brown, who Jalen Hurts threw him a dot on the sideline, wasn't able to come away with the catch. I mean, on both sides of the ball, the Philadelphia Eagles looked pedestrian tonight. And it's not going to be able to be enough to go up against the Niners, to go up against Dallas, who I understand it's a division game. I felt as if Dallas would win this game regardless, but for the Eagles to not show up at all was not something that I anticipated whatsoever. There's going to need to be some soul searching going on in Philadelphia because right now it's not great times for them.
The good news for Philly is if they win out, they still win the division. They still have a chance at the number 1 seed because them and Dallas would have the same division record, but Philly would have the better conference record. So this isn't exactly the end of the world for Philly in the grand scheme of playoff seeding. But I think this specific game was really two things. One, you have to give Dallas's defense credit because you mentioned A.J. Brown going 9 for 94, but I really remember one play that went beyond 10 yards, right?
Yep.
Before that, or besides that, it was mostly underneath stuff, whether it was screens, slants, just Stephon Gilmore did a phenomenal job being able to limit A.J. Brown down the field. How many times have we seen over these last 2 years A.J. Brown be able to beat defenders, beat the safety if they have help over the top, and score those long touchdowns? He wasn't able to do it today. He did have that one drop like you mentioned, but even still, if that's all you're allowing, which would have been 2 big plays to A.J. Brown, you're probably still looking at it as a win if you look at Dallas. I also think they did a really good job at blitzing Jalen Hurts. We've seen this for the last 2 weeks. They go out and say that, was it Nick Bosa who said we put out the tape on how you stop this Philly offense? And
Rude,
the all-out blitz, the cover zero blitz that Dallas had today multiple times, Philly doesn't have an answer for. JT O'Sullivan's put this in a lot of his, Jalen Hurts analysis and breakdowns, that Philly's offensive line doesn't really communicate the best in terms of picking up the most dangerous defender of who's blitzing Jalen Hurts. And a lot of the times that's why you see defenders being right up the middle attacking him. And it's a lot harder to evade someone coming up the middle rather than the left side or right side where you can just go the other way. So I thought they did a great job there because you've seen Jalen Hurts. He goes on his back foot. He had one play underneath the Smitty where he kind of just has to loft it in there. Smitty has to kind of, take a step back. It's at his knees. So he slows down. They make a tackle and now it's 4th down. There's a lot of plays like that during this game where Dallas was able to send cover zero, get to Jalen Hurts, whether it's an incomplete pass, a tip ball, or just short of the sticks because they aren't able to push the ball down the field. So number one, you have to give credit to Dallas's defense, but it was just so many mistakes on Philly's part too, because 3 fumbles, Jalen Hurts, that first fumble, you have A.J. Brown fumbling the ball from Stephon Gilmore, and then Smitty at the end of the game. At that point, game's probably over, but regardless, you're still having a chance to go down there. If you score a 10-point game, who knows what can happen? But the fact that you have 3 fumbles, 3 turnovers where Dallas only has 1, it was a fumble 6, which put them in position. I mean, we're looking at a defense that scored more than the offense. I tweeted out saying that the only way that Philly is going to be able to win games is if the offense is perfect. And the offense was so far from perfect today. They didn't even give the defense a chance. We could sit here and talk about the 33 points, but we have Jalen Hurts and MVP conversations. I've had Jalen Hurts going up there saying top 3 quarterback. He didn't play well enough. That's the end of the story. Even if Jalen Hurts and this offense were at the top of their game, we're talking about this as probably a field goal game, goes absolutely down to the wire, and whoever has the ball last probably ends up winning this game. But their offense straight up was not good enough. The reason why I'm not as worried is because I know this offense can be elite. The offensive line is great. Jalen Hurts is one of the best quarterbacks in football. They have some of the best offensive weapons in football. So I don't have too much of a problem thinking that this offense will be able to bounce back. The defense, though, I have no faith in. I have absolutely no faith in all that this defense can stop anybody. They have the Giants twice, Seattle, and they have Arizona, I believe. I think they'll be able to slow down Tommy DeVito. But if they have to go up against Geno Smith, who just put up 30 plus on this Dallas offense, on this Dallas defense, he'll probably be able to put up points on this Eagles defense too. Right now, they're probably a bottom 5 unit in football. They can't stop the run. They can't stop the pass. Situationally, they're bad. How many 3rd and longs, 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7s were Dallas able to convert tonight too? So overall, Dallas kicked their ass. We looked at 49ers last week saying it's the 49ers. They're the best team in football. They did it to Dallas. You have Philly coming on short rest. And I was giving them all those excuses too. This is back-to-back games of them getting their asses kicked by top teams in the NFC. I'd be sitting here lying to you if I said I wasn't worried come January when they have to make that next, probably see Dallas to San Francisco next, because right now, at least their defenses don't match up to it. And that puts so much pressure on this offense that they're probably going to have to end up pressing. And you have A.J. Brown going into this game saying, just wait. We've been talking in the locker room. Just wait. You'll see what we have. This is what you have. 6 points of offense. Your defense outscores you. This was a really bad showing by the Philadelphia Eagles. You have time. You have 4 weeks now to go up against some lackluster-ish opponents. Credit to, Seattle, who's a respectable team. But you have 4 weeks to kind of get things in order. Offensively, I trust you. Defensively, though, I don't see much things in the future that can fix.
Now, if you're Philadelphia, like you keep saying, you're not concerned about the offense. And I'll say this, I'm not concerned about it too much either, especially with the competition that they're going to face to end the season. But with the bigger picture, it is concerning to me that the two teams that they do have to worry about come playoff time in the Niners and the Cowboys, these last 2 weeks, the game versus San Francisco would have been a lot worse if not for garbage time. And you look at this game, you mentioned it. The defense outscored the offense, which we haven't seen from Philadelphia in a long time. But needless to say, the last 2 weeks are all that matters if you are a Philadelphia Eagles fan, especially because this was going to be the toughest competition that you were going to face back to back for the conference. You beat the Bills, you beat the Chiefs, you beat Miami. Obviously, these were impactful wins and very meaningful wins, and you were just able to scratch away with some W's, particularly that Bills and the Chiefs game. But the Niners and the Cowboys are the ones that are in the way on the way to the Super Bowl. And you could say it was a statement from both, not just the Niners, but from the Cowboys. Say, hey, listen, you guys are a great team. We acknowledge that. You're a great offense. Jalen Hurts, you've been playing at a great level. But, hey, Dak Prescott, I'm here. I'm the MVP. I'm playing at an MVP level. My guy, CeeDee Lamb, he clears your receiver over there. CeeDee Lamb had himself a baller game. Jake Ferguson, hey, Dallas Goedert, I respect that you came back. I'm glad that you're healthy. But, hey, I'm a contributor to this offense too. And we're seeing Pollard get comfortable too. And Rico Dowdle has been a very integral part in what they want to do as well. A nice change of pace back for them as well. And I'd like to see Tony Pollard. They're sticking to the scheme, running him up the middle, but he's been more effective. His vision has definitely improved over these last couple of weeks. He's been more of an impact player for the Dallas Cowboys. Right now, offensively, it just seems like nothing can go wrong for them. The offensive line held up great outside of that one play where you mentioned it. Dak was sacked and fumbled for a touchdown return. But outside of that, I thought the offensive line held up well. I thought Dak showed great poise in the pocket like he always does. Had some high-level throws. The one that CD dropped, that would have been almost a 70-yard touchdown. They're trying to say, oh, the defender got his hand in there. We were just talking about it before we went on air. Now, that was a CD drop, and we don't see a lot of those, but that was definitely a CD drop. And then that throw to Gallup over the top to ice the game, that was cold. That was right on the money, a dime piece. And that was a throw that kind of just gave everyone that notion of we're looking at the 2023-2024 NFL MVP and a Dak Prescott. And he just has to go the rest of the way playing consistent football. And I think that we're looking at the MVP. He's been pretty awesome. But, hey, I still have faith that my guy over there in Miami has a chance to win. And I think it'll come down to that Dallas-Miami game. It's, if I'm not mistaken, it's next week. No, 2 weeks. Because next week, Dallas plays the Bills. And then the week after that, Miami and Dallas meet up. But this was a great showing by Dallas. Definitely, if you're Philadelphia, you need to take a strong look at the film and say, hey, what did we do wrong? Very obvious takeaway could be, hey, we just need to do a better job of holding on to the ball. But at the same time, I think there just needs to be some revitalization with the offense. Brian Johnson definitely is still a concern when we talk about the Philadelphia Eagles. It's not just that defense, because the defense definitely is the main concern. But play calling, to me, also becomes a concern, especially with the last 2 weeks.
Shout out the comments. See Uncle Joe in here. Shout out Credit Card Connection. Shout out our guy Jared.
Shout out to the Credit Card Connection. I'm glad you acknowledged that. Go ahead.
Sorry, 2 things I want to mention on this game too before we move on to studs and duds. Number one, I'm just looking at the box score, And outside of Zacchaeus, who had that punt catch, right? That fake punt got a catch. There was legitimately 3 players in this Philly offense. It was in the passing game. It was A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, and Dallas Goedert.
Yep.
I don't remember the last time I've seen an offense where only 3 players realistically got receptions for the team when, unless you were only completed like 5 or 6 passes. The fact that I understand they're your best players, but I'm looking at Dallas's. You got Ferguson, you got CD, Gallup, Cooks, Pollard got 7 catches. The fact that they were just so hyper-focused on these 3 guys is interesting. And then also, if you just go back and look at this Eagles schedule, I do wonder how different it would be if, they had 6 really tough opponents. You had the Dolphins, this is a month ago at this point, Dallas the first time, Chiefs, Bills, Niners, Cowboys. They win the first 4 and then lose the last 2. Going into that, if you say over this stretch, you go 4-2, I think every Eagles fan is taking that. You'll probably take 3-3, 4-2, you're happy, 5-1, 6-0, you're ecstatic, over the moon. But the fact you lost these 2 games at the tail end of it to kind of go into the playoffs, because we still have a month left, but again, the opponents aren't as tough as the ones you just faced. If you would have, say, lost that, maybe that first Cowboys game, or maybe that Dolphins game or Chiefs game, but then bounce back later on in the season against against the 49ers, especially at home, or Dallas on the road, maybe more of a statement win, I wonder if we'd be thinking about the Eagles differently. But the fact that they have back-to-back losses, both on primetime, national television, and they got their ass kicked, it looks like a completely different situation. Going 4-2 is still a W with these opponents. These are some of the best teams in football. But I'm still not overlooking the fact that you got your ass smacked by 20 and 23 against the 49ers. And 49ers have felt like 50, not 23. So Philly, you're still going to be in the playoffs. You're still in contention for the number 1 seed. But that defense is looking questionable. I know Howie Roseman in the offseason, he's going to do his work, and you'll probably go out there and get you probably go and trade for Pastor Tan or Sauce and just fleece someone or something like that. Just the way Howie Roseman works.
That's true.
But the defense right now is very ugly.
You mentioned it. I think the main reason why we look at these 2 games and we're taking so much away from it is because, they lost, and you're allowed to lose in the National Football League, especially when you've only lost 1 game up until that San Francisco game. But it was the way they lost. You mentioned it. They got their ass kicked. They got dismantled against the Niners, and they just got their ass kicked again versus Dallas in back-to-back games. If it was a respectable loss, if one of the 2 levels had looked good at any part of the game, maybe we'd feel a little bit better about Philadelphia, but the defense struggled. Had some timely plays today, you could say, and the offense never really had that play to get them fully back into the game. But at the same time, there's really just a difficulty that the defense has in stopping offenses. And then versus the Niners, like we've already said 1,000 times, the offense wanted whatever they wanted. They were able to execute. The Niners did whatever they wanted. So I can't look at this Eagles team the same as I looked at it prior to that Niners game, just because of how badly they lost. But I'm with you. You still got to stay optimistic. But again, it just leaves a sour taste in my mouth when I think about how they lost.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's
do the studs and duds.
Let's do it, my guy. So week 14, studs and duds. We're going to start off with the quarterback 1, your guy. Now we can get to a little bit brighter spot of the show. Lamar Jackson. He had himself an unbelievable game, QB1 on the week. 24-43, 316 passing yards against the Los Angeles Rams, 3 touchdowns, and he paired it with 11 carries, 70 yards, 33 fantasy points. Lamar Jackson seems to be back after a little bit of a lull. When you needed him to step up in this game specifically, where the Rams had a good, they were really trying to pull off this upset, forced overtime. That's how great the offense was for the Rams. But Lamar Jackson answered every single punch that the Rams threw at him. He goes and has his own go-ahead drive before Matthew Stafford has his chance to go down the field and send the game into overtime. Lamar Jackson was nothing short of fantastic. Now, this one, I need to give you praise, because maybe it was birthday luck. Maybe God was just handing you a nice birthday present. But the smarts to play Desmond Ridder. Start of the damn week, my friend.
I wish I could take credit. I had no other choice. I legitimately had no other choice but to start Desmond Ridder. And I saw the Tampa Bay matchup, and I went back and looked at his history, looked at last year. I think they might have played earlier this year with Ridder starting too. And he was always around like 18 to 20 points. So I'm like, all right, I feel fine with this because the other guy I was interested in picking up was Joe Flacco. But Jared blocked me early on the week. I think Monday or Tuesday. I couldn't make cuts yet because I had some guys on like injuries and I didn't want to just make that decision yet. So I was basically stuck with Desmond Ritter. And the fact that he did what he did, I'll give it up to birthday luck, the fantasy gods, but they blessed me today.
347 passing yards, a touchdown through the air, a touchdown on the ground, a 2-point conversion gets him as this week's quarterback to one of the bigger surprises of the week. But again, had to give you your credit there. Starting him, even if you had to, due to situation, it worked out, it paid off. Quarterback 3, Mr. Justin Fields had himself a great game versus the Lions, fantasy-wise, I should say. 19 for 33, 223 yards, a touchdown through the air and also on the ground, 12 carries, 58 yards. I think that they just look comfortable. And honestly, that play on 4th down, what was it, 4th and 13, to draw them offside and to get DJ Moore all over the top. Amazing play by Justin Fields, just being smart at the quarterback position. And just DJ Moore is a different wide receiver when Justin Fields is on the field. That's just evident. Quarterback 4 on the week, Jake Browning. Back-to-back weeks of being in this conversation. 275, 2 touchdowns, has a touchdown on the ground as well. I mean, Jake Browning, are you buying the Jake Browning hype? But let me also ask you this question. Is there something to be said about the system over there in Cincinnati?
System quarterback, perhaps. You have Joe Burrow. He has the elite weapons in college, comes to the NFL, has 2 elite weapons again. Jake Browning steps in. Doesn't look like, anyone's been lost.
Missed the beat.
Browning's been fantastic these last 2 weeks. Did he come back into this game? Because he left with like a thumb spasms or some very strange injury designation. Did he return? Do you know?
He did.
He did. Okay. Because I saw him go out. They had McCarron come in. But Browning's last 2 weeks, he runs the offense effectively. He doesn't make many mistakes. He gets the ball out rather quickly. We're going to talk about some of the receivers, which is a bit surprising that he had such a good game. And spoiler, Jamar Chase did not have such a good game. But the way he runs this offense, fantasy aside, he's doing great for fantasy. But for real life, too, it shows up on the field.
I'm with you. Quarterback 5 this week, my guy, Matty Staffy. Almost 300 yards, just fell short, 294, 3 touchdowns. He had himself a great game. He had himself a good game. There were some situations where I thought that he was pressing, trying to do too much. One that comes to mind specifically was that throw to Demarcus Robinson to put his team or try to give his team the lead down the stretch. Almost throws an interception, but Demarcus plays some great defense. And Stafford had a chance to win the game in overtime too. They ended up falling short. But I think for fantasy football, you'll take it. Quarterback 5 on the week, no doubt. Brock Purdy, quarterback 6. This guy continues to be fantasy consistent. 368 yards on only 19 completions, 2 touchdowns. Did have an INT in this game. But versus Seattle, just seems like they just love to play against Seattle. Brock Purdy, the connection that he's had with Deebo Samuel since Deebo Samuel has returned, it has people remembering that Deebo Samuel is capable of being one of the best receivers in the game. And when we talk about our studs, the wide receiver 1 spoiler is Mr. Deebo Samuel. It's just a little respect that needs to be put on his name. Too much conversation about, injury prone. It was a fluke season last year. You got to respect talent when you see it. And Deebo Samuel, when he's healthy, when he's at 100%, there are very few wide receivers that are on his level. Do you want to shed some light on Mr. Brock Purdy?
The whole offense too. Like,
talk
it's
about
not
it.
Like the entire offense is different when Deebo Samuel is 100% because he's able to take screens, drags underneath routes and make 30, 40-yard gains out of them. He's able to take those short screens and be able to get big gains. You saw, obviously, the bomb touchdown he had too, but he also had multiple screens that went for like 30 yards, and you see him breaking tackles, the acceleration, the speed to go down the sideline. When he's healthy, this entire team looks different.
And obviously, we're supposed to be singling out Brock Purdy, but I just have to give credit where credit is due because Deebo's just been awesome. Quarterback 7, we weren't here for that Thursday episode. Bailey Zappi, he goes and finishes as a quarterback 7. I think we're reaching a new low for Pittsburgh Steelers football when we allow a guy like Bailey Zappi. Hey, you're in the NFL, you're a talented guy. Let me not be a hypocrite, of course, because I'm not you, Bailey. However, we understand the level of quarterback that Bailey Zappi is. The Pittsburgh Steelers have fallen off pretty tremendously, but quarterback 7, 240 yards, 3 touchdowns. He just took what the defense was giving him. He executed a great game plan and ends up here. And quarterback 8, Mitch Trubisky, a person that was also in that same game, 190 yards, 1 touchdown, a 2-point conversion. And what gets him here really is that touchdown on the ground. Josh Allen, 233 a touchdown and one on the ground too. This was honestly a subpar game for Josh Allen, and he's still in the top 10. That's just the greatness of Josh Allen, and like we all expected. Honestly, it was a good play coming in. Joe Flacco finishes as quarterback 10. He goes 311 yards, 3 touchdowns. I say it was a good play because I don't like Jacksonville's defense. I've been very vocal about this all season. I think that it's been overrated drastically, and we see Joe Flacco go in there and come away with the W and have some pretty high-level plays, but really it was a lot of David Njoku and the connection that they had. But that rounds out the top 10 with Trevor Lawrence, who was a late clear to play. He goes and finishes as your quarterback 11, but a lot of that was gained in garbage time as well.
I was going to say that's probably the ugliest QB 11. That was just Joe Flacco had big numbers. Trev had big numbers, but that game was so ugly on both sides.
It was ugly.
But moving on to the quarterback duds, we got some big ones this week. Number one, though, Patrick Mahomes, QB 18 on the week. He has just one top 10 finish in the last 6 weeks, goes for 270 passing yards, a touchdown, and an interception. Mahomes just isn't an elite option for fantasy right now. You know, maybe that's going to bite me in the butt this last month of the season, but the way I look at it, I'd rather have Brock Purdy for the rest of the season.
Stand 10. He's mid.
It sounds crazy when you say it out loud, but Patrick Mahomes just hasn't been that guy for fantasy. He had, even for real life, we still know the talent he has and what he's working with. He's able to perform. For fantasy football right now, you're looking at him as probably a low-end QB1. And for where you drafted him, you know, probably as a top 3 quarterback all the way back in August or September, he's not paying off come fantasy playoff time.
Now, Joel, one second, because we got a comment from Jonathan.
Here we go.
He says, should I think about benching Mahomes?
Who are the options? You got Brock Purdy. I'm starting Brock Purdy.
Would you start Jake Browning over Mahomes?
I'm not going that far. No. I don't care who Jake Brown is playing. I can't do that, especially with fantasy playoffs.
Let me stop trolling. Go ahead. Let's move on.
Jonathan, let us know your options though, and we'll try to help you out there.
Kyler is his backup.
Jalen Hurts. Say it again.
Kyler is his backup. Does have San Fran next week. I don't know if I'd go immediately and start K1 next week, but maybe weeks after I'll lean Kyler.
Weeks after that, he is playing Chicago and Philly. So I would be much more welcome to that than rather San Francisco. But Jalen Hurts, QB 22. This is his first finish outside the top 11, not the top 15, 20, outside the top 11 since week 1. He's been great all season long. Even when he's had so-so real-life performances, he's been really good for fantasy, but obviously didn't happen today. We talked about it. I thought Dallas did a great job sending pressure, making him uncomfortable, and Philly really didn't have any answer. He didn't get inside the 5, inside the 3 to get that tush-push touchdown that he gets what feels like every single week. No rushing touchdowns.
We needed it.
The offense had 3 fumbles. He had 1. It was a really ugly game. You just throw this to the side because the next 3 weeks for Jalen Hurts should be some spectacular football for real life and for fantasy football. But for this
Jalen's he's on notice, Joel. He's on notice.
I'm not worried about him for fantasy, Jalen Hurts. Is that what you're saying? He's on notice?
He's on notice, Joel.
You should sit him if we match up in the championship. Just, make a statement. Make a statement. Why not?
I would never do that. Listen, I'm in a joking mood. I need to relax, okay? That's my guy.
Moving on to CJ Stroud, though. This was a tough matchup for Stroud going up against the Jets. Didn't have Tank Dell. And then Nico Collins gets injured in the first quarter. I want to say maybe first possession of that game. And it went downhill from there. He finished with just 91 passing yards. The team as a whole had only 135 yards of offense. They went 1 for 12 on third down. And to add insult to injury, at the end of the game, he got rocked. But basically the game is over at this point. They're down 21, 24 points. It's surprising he's even in the game at this point. I think there's 2 minutes left on the clock, maybe 3. And he takes a big hit, gets the ball out, but he is in concussion protocol. That's something we'll have to monitor. We've seen basically 90, 95% of players, you get that concussion, you're going to be missing at least 1 more week. Potentially without Tank Dell and Nico Collins too, how enticing is CJ Stroud as a fantasy option? I'm not sure who his opponent is off the top of my head for next week, but CJ Stroud's been spectacular, especially with those 2 weapons on the field. But with concussion protocol and both of those guys off of the field, he might not be that elite option for the rest of the season. Jared Goff, QB 20 on the week, 160 yards, 2 interceptions, and a touchdown. He has just 1 finish inside the top 10 since week 7. And then next week, he gets a tough Denver defense who shut down the Chargers. I know Herbert got hurt. We'll talk about him just next. But even when Herbert was on the field, they were not able to move the ball a lick. They did a phenomenal job shutting down that passing offense. But the big plus for Jared Goff next week is they will be home. When they're playing indoors, the offense looks a lot different than when they're playing outdoors, Chicago or wherever else. Josh Dobbs, I know he's not exactly this flashy name, but someone who's been pretty good for fantasy, was QB 25, then ended up getting benched for Nick Mullins in a 3-0 victory over the Raiders. That was, I'll be honest, I don't think I watched a minute of that game. I'm glad I didn't. I saw Devontae Adams had like 29 yards on 9 targets. Who knows what's going to happen? You know, going into the bye, there was questions whether if Dobbs would start or not coming off that 3-4 interception game against Chicago. He ends up getting the nod and then gets benched around halftime of this game. And then the last person I want to mention is just Justin Herbert, who did fracture his finger on his throwing hand. If you remember, his first finger injury was on his non-throwing hand. You're kind of able to work through that, but on your throwing hand, they play on Thursday night this week. He's not playing on Thursday. That's obviously going to have huge impacts to Keenan Allen, who had a respectable day, but of course not Keenan Allen type numbers that we're used to seeing this season. And if the Chargers sitting at 4-9 now, I mean, there's a chance he doesn't play again all season long. Of course, that's going to be huge to Herbert if you have him, but Austin Eckler, this whole offense. We know the impact that Justin Herbert can have. Easton Stick would be the backup. He didn't look great. I didn't think, I mean, he got the ball out. He didn't, I guess, really make a ton of mistakes. But
hey,
overall,
you saw that dot to Quinn Johnston? I know you saw that dot to Quinn Johnston.
He had a couple big plays. Everyone's writing him off. Had a couple big plays. Shout out to him. Stick gave him a couple nice balls, but
the agenda's back.
Overall, I feel bad for Justin Herbert. Huh?
Is the agenda back? Are you back on the QJ wave?
Need more. We need way more. I've seen 13 bad weeks to 1 good week so far.
Justin Herbert, another broken finger. Finger game's weak. Tragic but true. CJ Stroud. You asked about his schedule for the rest of the season. He does have Tennessee next week. That's a solid matchup. Cleveland, I think that it's a good matchup, but if Nico's going to be out too, I don't know how confident I feel because no Nico, no Tank, no Dalton Schultz. This isn't a great situation for CJ.
That's especially that Nico injury. That's the calf that he's had a calf injury earlier this season. I don't know if it's the same calf. If it is, though, that's very concerning.
Just for that idea of CJ Stroud is the future of the Houston Texans, you understand that you have Tank Dell Shell for the season. Dalton Schultz and his return is questionable. I thought he'd be back this week. He wasn't able to suit up for this game. And Nico Collins, and we don't know the long term, or we don't know the injury for him going forward. I think that Houston looks at this season as, hey, we're playing a lot better than what people had anticipated us to play at. We lose against a bad Jets team who executed a great game plan. They beat our ass. I think we need to play it safe than sorry. Understand that, hey, we have some great pieces for the future. We can move on going forward knowing that we have a solid foundation. But moving forward for the rest of this year, let's keep it safe. Let's keep our young guys healthy. But I just have a feeling that when it comes to wanting to be on the field, I doubt CJ Stroud will try to not do everything he can to get on that football field. But yeah, Tennessee, Cleveland, Tennessee again. That's the last 3 weeks, and for what would be fantasy playoffs for a good portion of the people watching, Tennessee is one of the better matchups that you could have your quarterback having. I know you're facing CJ Stroud in our league, and I know you're probably not looking forward to that. But again, without Nico, without Tank, without Dalton Schultz, I don't know how much I love this offense. I know that CJ Stroud's going to be able to elevate guys like a Noah Brown. We've seen that happen so far this season already, where Noah's had some awesome games. But I don't know. It's not a great situation around CJ Stroud as of right now.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. That's I saw a lot of people saying that it's funny when you take away Nico Collins, Tank Dell, and Dalton Schultz, how CJ Stroud kind of looks like Bryce Young, and also going up against one of the better defenses in the NFL.
But again, it's not a slight to CJ. That he's not. They're not trying to be disrespectful. It's an acknowledgement of how fucking terrible that situation is over there in Carolina. Because you watch the tape, he has nothing. He's running for his life. I mean, the best part of Bryce's game today was his use of his legs and escaping pressure and getting first downs through the ground. I mean, it was a brutal game for him. But let's move on to the running back studs of week 14. Running back 1, turning back the clock, and I actually couldn't be happier, and I did not care that I was facing him in fantasy this week. Ezekiel Elliott, not the most efficient, 22 carries for 68, but through the receiving game, I mean, he looked like prime Randy Moss. 7 catches, 72 yards, and a touchdown. Of course, I'm joking, but he had himself a great game. Glad to see him get himself back into fantasy relevance. I had a feeling with just the opportunity that he was going to get. I like Zeke moving forward. This was a little bit of validation as the RB1. RB2, Brees Hall, and this one, it's a complete 180 from the me looking smart with Ezekiel Elliott and me not looking the brightest with Brees, for the idea of Brees hasn't been that great. He hasn't been the most efficient on the ground, really wasn't that efficient. This was the most yards per carry that he's had in weeks, though, at 4 yards per carry. But through the receiving game, this is where he becomes fantasy playable, where he had 8 catches on 9 targets, 86 yards, and a touchdown. If he's going to consistently be targeted in the pass game, which we have seen him over these last few weeks, no doubt about it. I mean, 9 targets this week, 8 last week, 9 the week before, and 6 versus Buffalo. He's getting peppered with targets. He was just able to make the most of his targets versus the Texans. Again, on the ground, hasn't been the greatest. This is his highest yards per carry since week 5 versus the Broncos, and that's when the Broncos weren't good at football. So you still have to take it with a grain of salt, but I'm going to adjust now. He's playable. You can play Brees Hall because of his passing work, but still be worried that next week is versus Miami, one of the better rush defenses in football, been playing as one of the best defenses in football. Already locked up Brees Hall, where he only had versus Miami. He did have himself a solid game, 11.9. Again, with the passing game, he's going to make himself fantasy reliable, or fantasy relevant, excuse me. So, what do you think moving forward? Brees Hall, is he a top 15 back?
I think 15. I think that's the perfect number. That's what I was going to say. 2 things. One, Robert Saleh said, I want to say after the game, that he has a few different injuries that's going on. You saw Dalvin Cook got the first snap of this game, technically labeled as starter. So something to monitor going forward. But Zach Wilson looked really good. I'm not falling into this trap that Zach Wilson is the future by any means. But I think it goes to show that he has I have nothing to lose type mindset. I don't know if the report's true. I have to go and see it. But he was talking to DJ Reed saying, what's the worst that can happen? I get benched again. Like, he's just been through kind of the mud of this, really being a quarterback in the NFL, being a player in the NFL, where you have this highly touted prospect, number 2 overall, has not lived up to that potential. But I think he knows it, and everyone on the team knows it, that he's not going to be on the roster 2 or 3 months from now. So why not go out there and play his style of football? I thought Hackett, for the first or second time all season, actually called a pretty good game. So if this offense goes from being the 32nd ranked offense to the 24th ranked offense, all of a sudden now Brees Hall looks like someone that you feel very comfortable starting with, because we know the talent's there. He's one of the most talented running backs in the NFL, one of the most explosive. He can make big plays happen, and you want that in your starting lineup. So if the Jets offense is able to look just respectable, and the first step is starting Zach Wilson over Tim Boyle, which they will do for the rest of the season most likely, then Brees Hall should be in your lineup.
Zach Wilson, shout out to him. Over 300 passing yards against the Texans defense that played relatively well versus my Broncos. For the Jets to go out there and execute a great ball game, credit where credit is due, no doubt. And I know you say you're not buying into the Zach Wilson hype, but I know in the back of your head, I know you're hoping and you're praying. I know you don't have me fooled, Mr. Dells. But number 3, my guy, James Cook. I mean, this guy, the last 4 weeks, double-digit fantasy points, and he's not even getting 50% of snaps. But where he makes a lot of his impact is through the passing game. He had 5 catches today, had 5 targets, 83 yards, and a touchdown. And he's efficient on the ground, had over 5 yards per carry in this one versus the Kansas City Chiefs, one of the better defenses in the game. James Cook, I think rest of the season must start. He's looking like an RB1 and has been playing as an RB1 for the last 4 weeks. Love to see this production out of him. Joe Mixon, I said it when Jake Browning was named the starting quarterback after Joe Burrow's injury. The only one I felt confident was Joe Mixon. That's seemingly wrong, because we saw T. Higgins have himself a decent ball game. Jamar Chase, not this week, but the last couple with Jake Browning, he's been awesome. But Joe Mixon has been pretty consistently in these conversations when we have this show. 21 carries, 79 yards, a touchdown, 3 catches on 4 targets, 46 yards. He's just going to get a lot of opportunity. And Joe Mixon, where he's not the most efficient, When you have opportunity, especially at the running back position, you're going to end up on this list. Rachaad White, I mean, one of the more exciting young players in fantasy this season. 25 carries, 102 yards. This would have been 3 weeks in a row that he would have had 100 yards. But if you remember last week, he stopped himself short to ice the game just because the game was over. He had 2 catches where this is one of the lowest he's had all season. 2 targets, 2 catches, 33 yards, and a touchdown. I mean, rest of the season, I have him in the same light as James Cook. This guy's probably a little bit safer because he gets more opportunity. But rest of the season, we're talking about an RB1. He's already a top 5 running back in all of fantasy football. Rashad's been nothing short of excellent. Top 5 is nuts. I never thought that would be the case. I really liked Rachaad coming out of the draft. I thought that he had the makings to be, or he had a similar skill set of an Alvin Kamara. He had great hands. He had great speed. It was just a matter of his vision, and that's been an issue. But also the run blocking has been poor for Tampa. He has gotten so comfortable in this offense over the last few weeks. He has been one of the bigger surprises in a great way in fantasy football this year. We have life, Mr. Dells. We have life. RB6, Austin Eckler. This trade isn't looking too bad anymore. Where I told y'all I got Austin Eckler. I'm trying to make a run for this back-to-back in Dynasty, solidify myself as the true king. I give up 2 first-round picks for Austin Eckler. He'd been mid since I acquired him, but he got it back in check. Finishes as RB6, 10 carries, 51 yards, had a touchdown, 5 catches, 7 targets, 449 yards. Obviously, with Herbert, you adjust, but it seemed as if the backup was still peppering Eckler with some looks. So that was great to see. Bijan, we've seen him in these conversations for the last 4 weeks now. 10 carries, 34 yards, a touchdown, but 5 catches on 7 targets, 54 yards. I mean, we're seeing Bijan get very comfortable. Last 3 weeks were versus the Jets. Jets are going to be a great defense. He was still able to have himself double-digit fantasy points, but has had double-digit fantasy points in 5 out of the last 6 weeks. So we're seeing him, Sean's a bastard. We're seeing him trend in the right direction, and that is mostly due to opportunity. I say Sean's a bastard because he's in our comments telling me how I choked the buy in that league. That's the sad, unfortunate truth, but we're going to overcome. Number 8, Chase Brown, 2 running backs from the Cincinnati Bengals in this top 10, but this one was due to a bomb screen pass touchdown that he took for 75 yards. He had 3 catches, 3 targets, 80 yards, and a touchdown, 8 carries for 25 yards. That was mostly carried by that big touchdown. Javonte Williams has himself a solid game, finishes as your RB9 this week. 17 carries, 66 yards, a touchdown, 3 catches for 4 receptions, 25 yards. I almost stopped myself mid-thought because he scored his first rushing touchdown since December. Wait for it.
I didn't
Of
believe it.
2021, Joel. I was dumbfounded to hear that fact. But once he said scores his first rushing touchdown, I was like, all right, I'm ready to hear him say 2021 because he missed all of last season. And I know we've struggled to run the football or at least convert in that regard, running the football in the red zone. But this was his 3rd touchdown on the season. But first, on the ground. And closing out our top 10, Jahmyr Gibbs, 11 carries, 66 yards, and a touchdown, 3 catches on 4 targets, 16 yards. I think the biggest takeaway for Jahmyr, he just looks explosive. He continues to look explosive, and he's one of the more exciting players, not just on the Lions, but in the National Football League. He just has so much burst to him that he just has any chance of a play to be taken to the crib. Gotta love the talent of Jahmyr.
One thing I want to say about Eckler, before the game started, I think we even got this for a couple of days ago. Brendan Staley basically came out and said that Eckler's going to get less carries. Like Josh Kelly is going to be more involved. We're going to kind of ride the hot hand type of situation. I think that's the report that came out around like 11 or 12 o'clock today. And the fact that Josh Kelly got 3 carries for 6 yards, I know there's someone out there, desperation play, went and picked up Josh Kelly thinking that something could happen. But thankfully, Austin Eckler has that job. He should have that job. Because Josh Kelly is not that guy. But anyhow, moving on to RB duds. We don't have a ton of huge names, thankfully. We get to receivers. We'll have a lot of big names. But for RB duds, the biggest one has to be Josh Jacobs. He was RB 35 in the week, 13 carries for 34 yards. Also ended up injuring his knee in the 4th quarter. We don't know the severity of that as of right now. But Zamir White and Amir Abdullah, they would be up next. We've seen Abdullah kind of be used more as a pass catcher throughout his career. Zamir White, someone who's been injured previously coming out of college, hasn't really found a role yet with the Raiders. We thought he'd kind of be the primary backup. But that's been more of Abdullah's role.
Talk about it,
I
Zamir
think the
White,
fact of the matter,
RB1 out of high school. Number one
RB1,
recruit out
yes.
of high
Zamir
school.
White,
Who
the
knows?
prospect profile was there. It was there. He ended up getting some injuries, though, which knocked him down. But I do think
Tragic.
that they're probably both going to eat into their workload, and it's a bad offense. So we'll talk about waivers at the end of the show. Not two players I'm prioritizing a ton. DeAndre Swift, 3 straight weeks outside of the top 30. He has just 11 carries for 39 yards tonight. Nothing through the air. We mentioned that earlier. Only 3 players had receptions in this game. Do you think this is just a product of tough defenses they've played, going against Dallas, San Francisco back-to-back? Because the next 3 weeks, as we talked about, got the Seahawks, Giants, and Cardinals. So are you expecting DeAndre Swift to bounce back, or do you think this offense is just kind of in a rut right now?
Versus the Cardinals, he most definitely should have himself a great game. Versus the Giants, another one. It's just right now you face 2 of the better defenses back-to-back. But also, we've kind of seen them shy away from the run, lean a little bit more into the pass. And I think that we saw some fans calling for it in today's broadcast for Sunday Night Football. They were saying, hey, let's run the ball. DeAndre Swift in the beginning of the year was great. Why have we kind of shifted away from that? I think it also has to do to the fact he hasn't been the most consistent in terms of success rate. But I think with the matchups moving forward, it leaves you a little bit confident with the fact that Swift can trend in the right direction.
Yeah, I'm with you. He's burned you these last, 3 weeks outside the top 30. The way he started the year was one of the best running backs in football. But these matchups coming up are too juicy. He should be in your starting lineup, and he should be producing at probably a top 12 level again. We talked about a bit on, we weren't here for Thursday, actually, so never mind. Najee and Jalen Warren were both RB3s this week, finishing as RB29 and 30 back-to-back. Didn't kill you by any means. But these are 2 guys I think that, we've been kind of getting more excited as the season got on. That Pickett went out. We're like, what does it look like? Now Mitch is here. I think with Mitch Trubisky at quarterback, they'll probably both be RB3s. We'll see what Kenny Pickett's going to look like. Can he come back in a week, 2 weeks? They did say that, in college, he had a high ankle sprain and came back in like 17 days or something. So maybe there's an outside chance he plays next week. Zach Moss, RB24, which is fine. But I did want to mention it just because we were expecting big things from Zach Moss. Once JT went down that first week after, automatically started the week. I'm bringing back the numbers we saw from that first month of the season, how great he was, the workload. But 13 carries for 28 yards. He did get 8 targets, which is nice. But just turned that to 4 receptions for 28 yards. He just hasn't been the dominant force. The dominant force we started to begin the season, he hasn't been that guy. We still are at least 1 week away until Jonathan Taylor comes back. The original report was 3 weeks. This next week will be that 3rd week. I'm still starting Zach Moss. I think he just has too much opportunity. And I know he's a pretty good running back, so I'm still starting him. But it is unfortunate that he hasn't been able to produce at the same level we've seen. And then the last pair of guys here, Gus Edwards and Keaton Mitchell. These Raven running backs have been pretty difficult to figure out. You have Gus as RB54 in the week, 6 carries for 15 yards. And Gus Edwards has damn near lost his job. Justice Hill led the way with 30 snaps. Keaton Mitchell was second with 24. Gus Edwards down, to 19. So not great for Gus Edwards. I think in the red zone, I still trust him, even though Justice Hill is getting some work there too. In 2-minute drill, we've seen Justice Hill get some work. Mitchell himself was RB33, still efficient, averaging 6 yards a carry. You see the explosiveness when he gets the ball. But Keaton Mitchell is going to get like 10 touches a game. So if he doesn't get a touchdown within those 10 touches, it's going to be hard for him to be fantasy relevant. I had to make a tough decision today where I had to cut someone I was looking at. I had to cut Roshan earlier. Thankfully, he did nothing. 1 carry. He's probably irrelevant for the rest of the season. But Keaton Mitchell was someone I wanted on my roster bad. But I think the fact of the matter is he's not going to be a workhorse. He's not going to get carries in the red zone. If he's not getting either of those and getting 10 touches, it's going to be hard for him to be fantasy relevant. So probably like an RB3 with upside on a weekly basis. But is Justice Hill, do we go out and pick up Justice Hill now or just hands off on this Ravens backfield?
What's funny is when they went into overtime and they were doing the coin flip, did you see Justice Hill out there with Odell lining up? To me, I know sometimes they kind of just send a whatever player out there, but it seems as if Justice Hill has a little bit of stain in this team. So picking up Justice Hill, I think that's more so of a, hey, worst case scenario, my running back situation is pretty terrible. yeah, I'll throw $2 to get him on my squad, especially at this point in time. I know Fab is probably a little bit thin, but it seems as if he has himself a role in this one. And I think Keaton Mitchell is the more talented running back of the group. But again, like you mentioned, he led the way in snaps. So obviously he has a role in this offense. So yeah, I think he is worth a pickup.
That's it. There's not a ton of duds for the running backs this week, thankfully.
Yeah, running backs definitely did themselves pretty well this week. But let's move on to the wide receiver studs of week 14. Like we had a conversation about earlier in the show, Deebo Samuel. Once again, you are wide receiver one on the week. 1 carry, 1 yard, 1 touchdown, efficient. Seven catches on 9 targets, 149 yards. Had that bomb touchdown that Purdy just dropped perfectly right in the breadbasket. He's going to continue to dog. And you look at the rest of the season schedule: Arizona, Baltimore, solid defense, but we just saw Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua have himself a great game against them. And Washington, Deebo Samuel will be a league winner. I'll guarantee that right now. He will win you leagues if you have Deebo Samuel. He's playing at a different level. Wide receiver 2, my guy, Drakeo mother-freaking London. 10 catches, 11 targets, 172 yards. Turn me up, Drake.
How far
wide
we've come
receiver
since week
2.
1-0.
And you know what? Sometimes you need to take that goose egg to go and reap the repercussions of this, baby. 29 fantasy points on the week. Also had a 2-point conversion. Doing this with Desmond Ridder. This is the future. This is the future of the NFL we're looking at in Drake London. I'm glad I never sold my stock in you, Drake. You make me look smarter and smarter every single day. Wide receiver 3, DJ Moore. I mean, the proof's in the pudding at this point. With Justin Fields, we're talking about one of the best receivers in football. 3 straight weeks since he's returned of over 20 fantasy points. He's going to continue to do this so long as Justin Fields is on the field. And he's been awesome with him. And that connection has been one of the better in fantasy football. We had the conversation about Kupp. What are we to think about him? He goes right and finishes as wide receiver 4 this week. 10 targets, brought in 8 of those, 115 yards and a touchdown. Kind of bailed out Matthew Stafford in a couple of situations as well. He looked the best that I've seen him so far this season. They were saying it during the broadcast, and I think I agree as well. This was his best game because he was going up against one of the best competitions that he was going to go up against this year. Great bounce back game for Cooper, and if you're a fantasy manager, you can take a deep breath because Cooper Kupp is still one of the most talented receivers in the league. Wide receiver 5, and arguably the best receiver that the Jets have ever had in their franchise, Garrett Wilson. He goes on 14 targets, brings in 9 of them, 108 yards. It just could be that simple, Zach. Oh, there's Garrett Wilson. Let me throw him the ball. He's one of the best receivers in the game. He's really good. He wins so often. I got to get him the ball as much as I can. 14 targets. That's got to be where it's got to be at, especially if this Jets offense wants any chance of putting up points. And we saw it. 30 points scored for the New York Jets. You guys were awesome today. And against no slouch by any means, the Houston Texans, who were banged up but have been one of the hotter teams in football. Wide receiver 6, Mr. Zay Flowers. Now we're getting into a conversation where, hey, another touchdown, 2-point conversion, 6 catches, did have 10 targets, 60 yards, where he's getting a little comfortable in this offense. I think last week was a bye week, but against the Chargers, he got into the end zone for the first time in his career, did score twice. Is it time? Is it Zay Flowers' time to shine over there in the Baltimore offense? Or are we just seeing the pass offense kind of get a little bit better week to week for the Baltimore Ravens?
He scored 1 or 2 touchdowns against the Chargers.
Against the Chargers, he had the passing touchdown. If I'm not mistaken, he had the rushing touchdown as well. Right?
That was
I could have swore he had a rushing touchdown. I'll look it up, but I only see receiving numbers here because
I feel like in back-to-back games he scored the touchdowns, and it's been like the last drive of the game where you're going into it. He's like, 5 for 60. It's like, all right, this is fine. Then he gets a touchdown that final drive, and like, boom, top 10 receiver all of a sudden.
He did have 2 touchdowns. He had a 37-yard rushing touchdown.
Mm-hmm. We know he has the talent. It's just kind of the way he's been utilized. I feel like especially the back half of the year, we haven't seen the same down the field shots that we saw in the beginning of the season. It's a lot of underneath stuff, a lot of screen game, but he's shifty. He's able to make guys miss in space. And he's still a really good contested catch receiver too for his size. He's sitting at 5'8", 5'9", but he go up there and high point the ball and be able to come down with it. So I think Zay Flowers, I still kind of view him how I viewed him all season long, which is probably a flex with some upside. You have Lamar Jackson there. You have one of the best offenses in football, one of the best quarterbacks in football. So he's someone I want to roster, but I still see there's a lot of volatility with him because if he's not able to get into the end zone and he's sitting there 5 for 50, now you're looking at 7 points, 8 points, depending on your scoring format, 10, of course, full PPR. But if he's not able to get into the end zone, he's a bit disappointing. So he does feel kind of boomer bust in that sense, but the talent's there. So I would like to have him on my team, and in good situation, good matchups, I'd be fine playing him.
Listen, last 2 weeks against the Chargers, saw 8 targets. This week, saw 10. The opportunity is going to be there for Zay Flowers to succeed, but you're right, hasn't been the most efficient the most efficient targets that you're going to see out of one of the upper echelon guys. But the last 2 weeks he's played football, he's been looking very strong and is going to be one of the better flex plays down the stretch of the season.
Rest of the season,
right?
Rest of the season, Rashee Rice or Zay Flowers? Asking for a guy, just as for a friend. Two rookie receivers, both have shown flashes. You got Rashee Rice coming over. Is it back-to-back touchdown games now?
Yes. Rashee Rice is the wide receiver 1 in Kansas City, and I'm glad that I was there for that at the beginning of the year. However, that is a tough question. I'll go with Rashee because it is Mahomes. He is the number 1 option. And you want to talk about the wide receiver 7 on the week, Zay Flowers' teammate, Odell Beckham. 10 targets as well, brought in 4 of them, 97 yards and a touchdown. And that touchdown was underthrown by Lamar Jackson. He was wide open, destroyed the corner, destroyed the safety. They were playing a zone, and that was obvious. Spoon kind of sat in the zone, but he beat that safety over the top, wide open in space. Odell seems back, Joel. I don't know if it's just the fan in me. Good. I love the game of Odell Beckham. These last couple of weeks, Odell looks comfortable. He looks like he's finally back in football shape and just in time for the playoffs, not just the fantasy playoffs, but for the NFL playoffs as well. This is exactly what the doctor ordered, especially with Mark Andrews being out for most likely the rest of the season. So with that being said, I'll lean Rashee because obviously you worry about Kelsey Kelsey is the number 1 option there. But with the attention that Kelsey has been drawing, the defenses are trying to take Kelsey out of the game. And Rashee Rice has been reliable and has been Mahomes' favorite, most consistent target outside of Travis Kelsey. I think Zay Flowers has great upside himself, but Rashee seems to have the safer floor by far.
Especially in the red zone. The fact that Mahomes trusts him as much as he's done in the red zone, they had the touchdown pass was really because of Travis Kelsey. They showed on the broadcast where Kelsey kind of goes across the middle of the field. The linebacker safety comes down. They have Rashee over the top. But it's a close one because I do think that the way Odell's been playing kind of over these last 2-3 weeks, really just kind of going back to that Thursday night football game against the Bengals. Since then, it feels like Odell's really getting to his own. The Ravens are going to need that if they want to make a deep playoff run. But I'm probably with you. Same logic. Just give me Mahomes and give me the guy that Kelsey. Listen, he's been phenomenal. He had another good game. Is he still that same dominant tight end 1 by far and away tight end in the league? We'll see.
And listen, Rashee Rice himself was a top 10 fantasy receiver this week. And the last 3 weeks, he's getting a ton of looks. 10 targets this week, 9 targets the week before versus the Packers, and 10 targets versus Vegas. They know that they need to get get the ball into their playmakers' hands, and they seemingly trust Rashee Rice. And this kind of is an anomaly when it comes to Andy Reid, and I keep saying this. When it comes to rookie wide receivers, we really don't see them excel in Andy Reid's system, but due to necessity, they need to get Rashee the ball because they don't have any other reliable option. So that's why I would lean Rashee in this situation. But wide receiver 8, Michael Pittman, one of the best fantasy players this season. We're talking about a top 10 wide receiver. He has had double-digit points in every week since week 5. He has been awesome. And, of course, CeeDee Lamb, he's going to be in this conversation every single week. Your wide receiver 9 on the week.
That's all we got?
Yes, sir.
Moving on to wide receiver duds. We got some big names here. Starting off, Jamar Chase, 3 catches for 29 yards. You mentioned Mixon and Chase, both top, 10 running backs this week. Both Mixon and
Yep.
Chase had more receiving yards than Jamar Chase, or excuse me, Mixon and Brown, Chase Brown, that is.
Yep.
They both had
Yep.
more receiving yards than Jamar Chase, as well as T. Higgins. So you go out there, you start Jamar Chase every single week. But with Jake Browning, it's not going to be the same sort of ceiling with him, but probably also not the same type of floor. Although he had a pretty big ceiling game last week where he had that big, 67-yard touchdown.
Yep.
But another big name here, Stephon Diggs. 3 out of 4 weeks, he's been outside the top 40. The 1 week he was in the top 15 was against Philly, who hands out top 15 finishes like it's their job, like it's charity. Still saw 11 targets. What do we think is going on with Stephon Diggs here? I'm not going to overreact because, of course, Stephon Diggs, you go out there, start him every single week. He's going to lead the team in targets basically every single week as well. But something's going on because 3 out of the 4 weeks outside the top 40, especially if you look at first 2 months of the season, he was probably the most consistent wide receiver in all of fantasy football. It felt like it was a lock that he'd be a top 10 finish. And it wasn't like a top 10 finish where he's scoring 2 touchdowns, where he has this 60-yard bomb. He's getting 9, 10, 11 receptions, and he's going for over 100 yards every single game. That hasn't been the case for this last month of the season. The Bills have kind of been teetering too, up and down, winning some games, losing some games. Feels like all of them are close. But Stephon Diggs hasn't been that same type of dominant force we've seen fantasy-wise. Do you have an answer? Because I really don't know what's going on in that offense.
To start the season, 5 out of the 6 games over 100 receiving yards. Has not had over 100 receiving yards since that game versus the Giants. The highest he's had was 86 versus the Bengals. And even in that Eagles game where, yeah, he looked good. He seemed back and fantasy-wise was the best that he's been since that game versus the Giants. I mean, it just seems as if they're trying to spread the wealth with that offense and not be Stephon Diggs-centric. And I'm fine with that because they've been winning some ball games. They won this game versus the Chiefs, and that was also with James Cook having the impact that he had in the receiving game as well. They're trying to get Dalton Kincaid involved in the offense a lot more. So I think that it's trying to not just be so obvious with what they want to do with their game plan and have defenses be on their heels and not just kind of take away Stephon Diggs and ruin the offense for the Buffalo Bills. When you have Josh Allen, you're going to be able to do a lot on that football field. And I think that it speaks more to the Buffalo Bills offense that they can still play winning football. They can still be one of the better offenses in football without Stephon Diggs being one of the most dominant players in the game, because his impact is bigger than the numbers. You know, the attention that he draws away to allow his teammates to have success as well. But when it comes to fantasy football, I know managers really don't care about that, but I still think that he'll get his. It's inevitable. But right now we're seeing the Buffalo Bills care more about winning and playing team ball as opposed to let's get Stephon the ball because that's our best option to win, where early on in the season, that wasn't the case.
The other player who's probably the only one who's been more consistent than than Diggs that first month through the season was Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Correct.
This is his first time all season long where he's under double-digit fantasy points. Outside Jahmyr Gibbs, I mean, there really wasn't anyone on this offense worth starting this week. 3 catches for 21 yards. He'll be fine. Denver next week. I'm not sure if PS2 is going to shadow him. You think he will in the slot, outside the slot?
Doesn't matter. Jaquan McMillan, baby. Jaquan McMillan, baby.
He had a big play today, too, in that Chargers game. But Amon-Ra, of course, going to be fine rest of the season. Mike Evans, this is a tough week to have your worst game of the season. Wide receiver 84 on the week. Only has 1 catch for 8 yards. In a game where the Bucs put up 29 points in the weirdest way. You mentioned Rachaad White was one of the best running backs for fantasy this week, going over for over 100 yards. The Falcons had 434 yards of offense to the Bucs 290. Baker threw for less than 200 yards. Godwin led the way of all receivers with 53 receiving yards. Yeah. A very strange way to score 29 fantasy points to get that safety. But it was just a strange game offensively. They were able to pull it off right at the end, having a game-winning drive from Baker, which was fantastic drive by him. But I think Mike Evans, he's been one of the more consistent receivers in football. Just broke 1,000 yards last year. We know how great he is. I'm just chalking this up to just a bit of a strange day more than anything else. Moving on, though, Brandon Cooks, he had a very juicy matchup coming into this week, but he came up short. He had a potential touchdown where he went down at the 1-yard line. It was very close, but the knee was down on the one. Just 2 catches for 37 yards after basically a month stretch where he was a pretty firm kind of wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 with some blow up potential there. But I do think the Cowboys are going to need him going forward. They have some tough matchups coming up where they're going to have to throw the ball. Even if they don't have to throw the ball, they still throw the ball because that's what their offense has become this season. So I'm still fine starting Brandon Cooks kind of as the flex play, wide receiver
Definitely.
3. Jordan Addison, wide receiver 58. Over the past month, his best finish has been wide receiver 29. At this point, with maybe Josh Dobbs, Nick Mullins, is he even startable, or is that someone you just put on the bench?
It's over. I have him in one of the leagues that I'm in the semifinals. He hasn't touched the starting lineup in weeks. It's done.
I don't disagree. A couple injuries I want to go over. We mentioned Nico Collins earlier, but just to reiterate that, injured his calf in the first quarter. We'll double check Thursday show. We'll see if that was the same calf or if it was a different calf. Regardless, there's a chance he's going to miss some time. Then a big one, Justin Jefferson, who has an internal chest injury. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but it seems like he managed to avoid any sort of like rib fracture. That could be a maybe possible another IR stunt. It did seem like Kevin O'Connell was moderately optimistic after the game ended. But with the quarterback situation in Minnesota, you're starting Justin Jefferson, of course, top 2 receiver in football. He's that dude. But just understand that with Dobbs or Nick Mullins, who knows what Justin Jefferson's going to look like week in and week out. Just got to hope that his chest injury isn't too serious. We can see him back on the field next week.
And they said that they took him to the hospital just for safekeeping, just to make sure that everything was all right. So it is good. It's good news to hear that he's doing all right, and definitely great news that he avoided serious injury, because the game he comes back, one of the first catches that he has in the game, I think it was his second catch on the game, he goes and takes a lick. And really, that's also Josh Dobbs. It's on Josh Dobbs a little bit. He kind of threw that ball in no man's land and kind of put it in a position where Justin Fields had to go up there and get it over the middle of the field, no less. And, of course, the defender's going to have an easy play making a tackle on Jettas. So that was tough to see, but, of course, hoping the best for Jettas, one of the game's best. Game's better with him. Let's move on to tight end start of the week. We had 13 tight ends, Mr. Dells. 13 finished with double digits this week. Let's go over a few of them. First one, Evan Ingram. Last week, he breaks the spell of most targets without a touchdown. This week, he goes and adds 2 more, 95 yards, 11 catches on 12 targets, 33 fantasy points. Have a day, Mr. Ingram. David Njoku, 2 touchdowns himself, 91 yards, 6 catches on 8 targets, 27 fantasy points. He seemed like a man on a mission today, throwing people out the way, yards after the catch. Njoku was awesome. Isaiah Likely, 83 yards and a touchdown. He's your tight end 3. Hunter Henry on Thursday had himself a solid ball game. Bailey Zappi threw him 2 touchdowns. Your tight end 5, George Kittle, my brother in Christ, 76 yards and a touchdown. 3 catches, 5 yards, and really a lot of this was on that 1 touchdown catch that went for over 40 yards. I mean, he's a big play machine waiting to happen. He's one of the more efficient tight ends that you're going to have. We saw Davis Allen, young tight end for the Los Angeles Rams, finish as your tight end. No. They would not shut up. They would not shut up about how awesome he was. 5th round pick. The Los Angeles Rams do it again. Puka Nacua. Now Allen. They just are just masterminds. Hey, great week. 50 yards and a touchdown. And there, ironically enough, he had a play that I think it was 3rd down and 9. He had a chance to catch the ball and run for a little bit, and he ends up dropping it. That's when it was like, oh, we're talking him up, and he has the drop. So
they were saying, they're like, the broadcast was saying, if the Rams call you for a 5th round pick, just decline because they know what they're doing. I was like, did he have more than 3 catches entering this game? I was like, I didn't even know this guy existed before Tyler Higbee went down.
It's more so, it needs to be praised to Matthew Stafford. It doesn't matter who's with him. He's going to make you great. He's one of the better quarterbacks this game's ever seen. Just needs to be a respect on his name. This isn't more so about Allen, where he had himself a good ball game. It's about Matthew Stafford and what he can do when the ball's in his hands. Special guy. Tight end 7, Kyle Pitts. Congratulations, bro. You're back. 57 yards and a touchdown. Had himself a nice ball game. Travis Kelce, this is the first time I feel like in moons we haven't seen him in the top 5. 6 catches on 10 targets, 83 yards. Was just missing that touchdown to put him in that conversation, honestly. Jake Ferguson, this is one of my favorite guys in the league, honestly. And I say that for the idea of late season pickup. I lose Mark Andrews. I go and I sneak in a little Jake Ferguson action. 72 yards, 8 targets, 8? 5 catches. I like me some Jake Ferguson, Joel, especially in this Cowboys offense when they're just one of the most prolific passing offenses in the league. Jake Ferguson, he's the number 2 option on this team, and he's going to consistently be one of the better tight ends for fantasy football. And rounding out this top 10, Mr. Cole Kmet, 66 yards, 7 targets, and brings in 5 catches.
Yeah, you mentioned it. 13 tight ends finished with double-digit fantasy points. That means we don't have a lot of duds. I have 3 names here. Sam Laporta, 2 catches for 23 yards. He had those back-to-back weeks where he was top 3, putting up crazy numbers. But now one of the worst finishes this season, or really this week, which is 4.7 points. Dalton Kincaid, we wanted to see kind of what Kincaid was going to look like with Dawson Knox back. Now, the bad news is, production-wise, wasn't great. He was a bottom 20 tight end this week for fantasy. But in terms of routes run, he ran 36 routes, which was second most on the team, and damn near 3 times the amount of what Dawson Knox was running. He was around, I think, 16 routes, I want to say. Maybe not 3, but like 2.5 times the amount Dawson Knox was out there. So I think Kincaid is still fine. You're going to look at this and say, first week back with Dawson Knox, can I trust Kincaid going forward? And the Bills, the first half, were able to move the ball. Second half, not so much. Kansas City did a great job being able to slow down that offense, who's been, really rolling as of recently. Of course, they have their hiccups here and there. But Dalton Kincaid, you love to see him running the second most routes, more than Stephon Diggs, just 1 less than Gabe Davis. So I'm still comfortable with Dalton Kincaid going forward. But that's something you have to monitor because it is the first game back with Knox. Next week, does he run 25 routes and Kincaid runs 32? Then we'll have a different conversation. But if he's sitting around, 2.5 times more routes run than Dawson Knox, he should still be looked at as a top 10 tight end. And then Dallas Goedert, first game back from injury. Don't know if anyone's expecting anything great. But of course, in a tight end landscape where there's, not always a ton of matchups or a ton of names available with buys, injuries, whatnot, 4 receptions for 30 yards. Going forward with better matchups, he should be a lot better.
I'm with you. All right, brother, let's move on to the last segment of the show. We're going to talk about waivers. But before we do that, let's take a second. If you guys have made it to this point, one, we appreciate you guys taking your time to spend your Sunday or now your Monday morning with us. But hey, leave a like on this video. Helps us out a lot. If you aren't already subscribed to the channel, come on, what are you doing? Subscribe to the channel. Go ahead and turn that notification bell on so you know when we go live, like nights like tonight. Didn't go live Thursday, but we will be going live Thursday and Sunday moving forward. But let's move on to the waiver wire section of the show. Just throw you some names. We mentioned Desmond Ridder as your quarterback 2 this week. Do you have any idea of keeping him moving forward? Does have Carolina. You know my opinion about starting players against Carolina. If you're not a running back, don't do it. Indianapolis and Chicago, who's been sneaky good.
I hope you don't have to pick up Desmond Ridder. I know he just had, what was he, top 5, top 6, whatever he was this season.
He was top 2.
But not somebody I want to start on a weekly basis. And Carolina has been one of the tougher opponents in terms of fantasy quarterbacks. So not looking to pick him up this week. If you're absolutely desperate, though, 2 weeks from now, going up against Indy, he could be streamable kind of as a quarterback too. But I wouldn't expect this type of performance.
All right, let's move on to running back just because the quarterback situation's ugly. Like, do you want me to talk about Zach Wilson?
Easton Stick? Zach Wilson?
Yeah, I mean, are we going to talk about Easton? Do you want me to?
No, we don't have to. Zach, so the Jets have Miami next week. No, thank you. Easton Stick, short week against Vegas. No, thank you. We can move on.
Okay, I'm glad that we're on the same page. All right, running back, Jerick McKinnon, where we saw Pacheco be a scratch early in the week. If you were able to pick up McKinnon, did score a touchdown this week. Are you having any interest for the idea of, hey, we don't know the long-term of Pacheco's injury? I feel like I would just play it safe. I was one of those players that did bring Jerick McKinnon onto my squad after the Pacheco news. So to me, I feel like he's worth a pickup.
Yeah, I think it all depends on who you have to drop. Because McKinnon still got, he got less than 10 touches, I want to say. I don't know the exact number, but of course we know he's not going to get a lot of carries. I want to say he had 1 carry today. So you're looking through receptions and he didn't have a ton. He just got into the end zone, which obviously is going to help you. So it all depends on who you have to drop. Are you looking at, would you rather have Keaton Mitchell or would you rather have McKinnon? Would you rather have Clyde or McKinnon, Justice Hill? Like those are probably the names you're going to be looking at. And we don't really know on Pacheco's status. You heard early last week, or I guess not early last week, but later this week when we heard the news that Pacheco was going to be scratched. It seemed kind of 50-50 if he was going to get placed on IR. Now we sit here Sunday, he was not placed on IR, which makes me think that he'll probably be back within the next week or two. So of course I'm not dropping some crazy fab on him. If I'm in a must-need kind of spot start, I think he is okay because of the pass catching upside, but not someone I'm really prioritizing.
You mentioned Clyde. Is he another one that enters your matrix? He was the lead back in today's game versus Buffalo. Next week does have New England, who has very sneakily been one of the best defenses in the league since week 9. They've allowed the fewest points. So you have New England, Las Vegas. I think that's a good matchup. And then Cincinnati. I think that's also another solid matchup. But I feel like Pacheco, he should be back by that point in time. Again, I just think that if you're on the Chiefs offense, you're worth a look. So to me, if Clyde's available and you don't have to spend that much money on him, I think I would make it a priority of mine.
Would you rather have
To Clyde or McKinnon? I think for passing work, the answer is obvious. It's McKinnon. And last year, maybe I'm also living in last year where McKinnon was a fantasy dream down the stretch. He was just getting into the touchdown religiously. He was getting into the end zone, religiously, touchdowns religiously. And this week, we saw it again where he got into the end zone. The Chiefs do have a pass catching issue, and he had been one of he is a reliable guy. I think I would go Jarek for the pass work just because Clyde, we just know the history of him, and I just don't feel that great, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'm fine. Clyde he had 9 fantasy points today, 40 yards on the ground, 6 out of 20 through the air. So nothing crazy. And we saw McKinnon actually got the goal line carry too. Not crazy interested in either, but yeah, probably lean McKinnon just in case, pass catching upside.
Is Chase Brown entering your matrix, sir?
He's getting there. If you're in a deeper league, like I picked him up in our dynasty league, just because he's a rookie, I want to say, or maybe year 2 player. I forgot. Rookie year 2. He has some upside. We know Mixon has a stranglehold on that backfield though, but Chase Brown brings something different to the offense. Like he has explosiveness. He has some juice to him that Mixon's more of the power back. You have some lightning to his thunder there, but I just don't know if he's going to get enough work week in and week out to be someone that you could start. But if you have a bench spot open, would you rather have Chase Brown or McKinnon? Chase Brown or Clyde? These are kind of the names that I'm all thinking about. But he's the clear RB2 on this team.
All right, let's move on to a more interesting position. We told you guys to pick up Zeke. I'm not even going to bother telling you to do it again. He's rostered in over 70% of leagues. You missed your chance. It's gone. For wide receiver, Dontavian Wicks. Shout out to our brother, Joel V. Moran, over there in Phoenix right now. Is Dontavian Wicks, is he someone that you're looking into?
He's another one. Probably has flex play, week in and week out. He's kind of a lock for around 50 yards. So if he's able to get in the end zone, you're looking at someone who's probably going to be a wide receiver 2-ish on the week. But I feel all of them are kind of the same. Him, Jaden Reed, Romeo Dobbs, all of them kind of get equal opportunity and equal production. So if any of them are available, I'll be happy to pick them up.
Okay, now Parker Washington did find himself in the end zone once again. This is 2 weeks in a row with a touchdown. With Kirk out, is Parker Washington worth a pickup to you?
I would prefer like Wicks in that. I would prefer, I think, all 3 Green Bay Packers over him in that situation. Back-to-back weeks with the tight ends isn't anything to slouch about. And as you mentioned, Christian Kirk out, going to get more opportunity. And if you actually look at the numbers, when Trevor Lawrence, at least today, targeted Calvin Ridley and Zay Jones, it was disgusting. Like we're talking like 50% completion percentage. And when it was anyone else, it was like 70 to 80% completion percentage. For whatever reason, he's just not on the same page as the top 2 guys. But those other options, Evan Ingram, Parker Washington, he's worth a speculative ad. But I feel like at this point in the season, if you're competing for the playoffs, I don't know if you have someone worth dropping for Parker Washington.
All right, last name, Quinn Johnston. Are you in?
I'm still not. Herbert's out. No,
right,
that's easy.
Good answer.
If Herbert was in, I would have had to sit here and think about it. But with Easton Stick, no thank you.
All right, for tight ends, Isaiah Likely probably is picked up, but he's rostered in 58% of leagues. If he's available in your league, pick him up. Brevin Jordan, with Dalton Schultz out, if Nico's going to be out, no Tank Dell, maybe there's opportunity for Brevin Jordan to get his. Only saw 3 catches, 3 targets this week, 35 yards. But the week before that against Denver, 64 yards, 5 targets, 3 catches. Brevin Jordan's not a bad player. I think if you're desperate at tight end, there are worse options to have. In my league, that I'm in a 12-man league, I needed a tight end because Dalton Schultz has been out. I picked up Brevin Jordan. Hasn't been He wasn't bad versus Denver. Wasn't that great versus the Jets, but he's not going to face the Jets every week. Does have Tennessee next week, Cleveland the week after that. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Dalton Schultz, of course, but one of those plays to keep in mind. Dawson Knox is back from injury, is rostered in 15% of league, excuse me. You mentioned it in the dud section, 3 catches, 3 targets, 36 yards. If he's available, I think if you're desperate at tight end, another one. There's worse people to have, and one of those players that he's on the Bills offense, he's worth being picked up, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm with you. Brevin Jordan, the glamour, I don't know if he really had any glamour, but if you're in like the depths of fantasy football and draft season and whatnot, he at one point had some glamour to him. But he's going to have opportunity. You mentioned it. There's a ton of injuries on this team. Of course, CJ Stroud still, playing at like a top 10 level, even though didn't have it today. So if you're in desperation mode where you absolutely need a tight end and you're looking at these names of like Cade Otton or Brevin Jordan, I'll throw the risk there and go with Brevin.
All right, I'm also looking at defenses this week. For the following week. Denver versus Detroit. It sounds crazy, but Detroit has not looked that great offensively. I've been saying it. The Bears defense is good. It has been playing well for multiple weeks now, and they just held Jared Goff to under 7 fantasy points. The Broncos have been one of the better defenses in the league for almost going on 6 weeks now, and I think going up against Detroit, something's telling me that this Denver defense is definitely worth the play.
It has upside because Jared Goff has been super turnover prone in this last month, and you guys are right up there, number 1 and number 2 with the Jaguars in terms of turnover forced. So the upside is there, pick 6, fumble 6, something like that. But I do think Detroit's a different team when they're home in the dome. That's the only thing I will say. I don't know if they're going to score the 30-plus points we've seen, but I do think they have some more upside. If they was in Denver, I'm with you.
Last one I'll say is Indianapolis versus Pittsburgh, one that you would think about because of how bad Pittsburgh offense is.
The Colts defense for fantasy is top 5 this year. I think it was number 3 going into this week. They just make some crazy plays. They had like the block punt a couple weeks ago for 6, right? They make some nuts plays, even though the defense statistically hasn't been great. One other name I'll throw out there, Thursday Night Football, Raiders defense against the Chargers in Easton Stick.
Okay. No, definitely. I mean, Easton Stick's going to have to show me something. He didn't look that great against us. He had that nice play to Quentin Johnson. I'll give him that. He did lead a touchdown drive with Austin Eckler down the stretch of the game. But against Vegas, who, again, we just saw them clamp up Minnesota. Not that that's saying much at this point with Josh Dobbs. Unfortunately, Dobbs' sanity is over. But they played very well today. And I think that going up against a backup quarterback in Easton Stick, I don't mind that matchup, not even a little bit.
Yeah, that's all I got, man.
All right, Mr. Dells, if that's going to do it for you, that's going to do it for me. We're going to wrap episode number 27 up for the fantasy reaction. Listen, again, if you've made it this far, leave a like on the video. It helps us out a lot. We really appreciate it. One more time, happy birthday to my brother, Mr. Joel Dells. I hope you had a great 26th birthday, my guy. But that's going to do it from us over here. We'll catch you guys probably tomorrow for our Pick a Side stream regardless. But